Hello again, everyone. I wanted to record another video just because I know there were some outstanding questions from our workshop that I wanted to follow up on. Some of the questions seemed really important. I think many of them we did address, but there were a handful that I wanted to pull out and just give a little bit more time to. I also wanted to put this information up again in the background about how to contact me and Fertile Soil Strategies, how to learn more about what we do. You can see our website is here. You can explore that, see our blog, and see information about the different services we provide, including one-on-one consulting. We also do sort of a more comprehensive consulting package where we include trainings for your staff and board and a year of support around creating a fundraising plan and implementing it in your organization. And then we have trainings and things that we provide or that we can even tailor to the needs of your organization. So if that's the sort of thing that you're interested in, you can email me at kamel@fertilesoilstrategies.com, and I'd be happy to set up a consultation meeting to figure out what your needs are and how we can be supportive. That being said, I wanted to launch into a handful of questions and just see how much information I can provide that might be helpful to y'all. So, the first question is specifically, how do I make a donor feel we really appreciate what they gave? We had a large unsolicited donation and we just thanked her and her foundation, but what more can we do? That's a really great question. It's great that you thank the person and that you thank the foundation as well. That's wonderful attention to detail. Hopefully you did that in kind of a timely manner. The general recommendation is 48 hours. I know people can get busy. If you don't get it in the 48 hours, it's just important to do it. A lot of the time, like I said, you'll have automated thank yous that go out. You want to make sure that those go out so people get something right away. And then follow up. And it doesn't have to be too complicated. It can be a phone call, it can be an email. Yeah, I love a handwritten note. I just keep a bunch of thank you cards nearby and really a quick handwritten something. I like cursive, not everybody does cursive, but thank you so much for your gift. Um, we really appreciate you. If you have more time, you might write more of a message. Phone calls are great because it's really easy to just get on the phone really quickly and tell somebody something quickly without having to go through the trouble of writing it down. A lot of the time on the phone, what I would say is, hi, this is Kamel from Fertile Soil Strategies or whatever organization I'm with. I'm just calling because I wanted to thank you so much for your gift of blank amount on blank date. We're so grateful for your support. And because of donors like you, we're able to do X. So I would just something bite-sized that you can kind of help them contextualize how they're making a difference in your organization. And then, I might say, hey, I would love to sit down with you when you have a chance and talk to you more about what work you're giving is making possible in our organization, what our plans are for the next year. A lot of the time in with when I was working, especially in organizing, our work was really leadership driven. And so I would bring donors with me to meeting. I'm sorry, I would bring members and leaders with me to meetings with donors. I had one donor in particular who was very wealthy and made a regular $20,000 gift to our organization he gave to us for years. And every time I met with him, I brought a different person from the organization. So he got a chance to meet everybody. He got a chance to meet a ton of people, which also meant that when he came to our events, people knew him. And he would tell me that he really loved that because he got to like I didn't come in as an ED and tell him this is what we do. He got to talk to the people who were directly impacted. And, for us, that was also part of our training, right? It was really important to us that we were training the people that worked with us so that they could do pretty much everything that I did, right? So I wasn't the only one talking to donors. And for me, that was also a question of like power in the organization and how we're sharing power, making sure everybody has the same connection or some similar connection to the donors for that kind of organization was really important. Making sure that people had the skills and the experience fundraising, that they got to look the people in the eye who were funding the work and actually make all of those connections and understand what money was coming in. We were also sharing the budget with people and making sure people understood all of that. So that kind of transparency and training was important. So all of that can be folded in. So I think the one-on-one meetings are a great way to not just thank people, but also build a relationship. And, sometimes, like I said, you can do things like, if a donor is giving a certain amount, you might give them something like a hat. I work in a theater now, so a lot of the time we'll offer drink tickets. I mean, the Bushnell has a structure of membership benefits. So when somebody becomes a member, they get all kinds of benefits for because of when they come in for a show, something to enhance their experience. There's a restaurant at the Bushnell that you have access to if you give it a certain amount. There's events, special events that only donors have access to. So if you are, for example, like I mentioned before, not just having solicitation events, but also having events that are for cultivating your donors and for thanking your donors. We have a donor recognition event. We actually have two now, one for donors of a lower level and one for donors of a higher level. That was also just because the event was getting too crowded. But you can have these different events, you can have them at different tiers, where you're really just bringing your donors in and appreciating them. At the Bushnell, we work in show business, so we have the opportunity to bring in people who can perform and who can give sort of an insider's perspective on how theater gets made and how Broadway gets made, which is really exciting to our donors. Whatever you have going on at your organization, you're going to find that thing that uniquely displays who you are and gives your donors something that they can really appreciate. So, say you work in healthcare and you're providing healthcare services to people, maybe you can bring in some people who are beneficiaries of your services to talk about the impact that it's had on their life. If you work in organizing, you might bring some people to tell some of those stories about the organizing work they're doing and the impact that it's having. So, I would say as much as possible you want to make sure that you're sharing who you are and finding creative ways to connect your donors to the work that you do, while, like I said before, being respectful of whatever boundaries you need to set for your organization to either protect the privacy of the folks that you work with or just maintain boundaries with donors who can sometimes, there are some donors who, if they're giving it a certain amount, believe that they're buying certain access or certain influence over your organization. And that's something you might want to manage expectations around. You want to be really clear about how decisions are made in your organization and make sure that your donors understand that. So the organization that I was in was leader run, it was member run, that was non-negotiable. And I definitely had donors come to me and say, well, if I give you this money, then I want you to do X. So I worked with an organization that organized parents and students around school reform, and a local banker was offering us, and it was only a couple $1,000s. So in the grand scheme of things, it wasn't a huge portion of our budget, but even if it was, this was absolutely non-negotiable. And he said to us, I want to make this gift, but only with the promise that you will never work with the teachers union, which for a parent and youth-led education organization makes absolutely no sense strategically. And there's not an amount of money you can pay us to get us to agree to that. And I told him as much. And I said, maybe in the future, you'll feel differently or something will change here, but at this moment, that's not going to work out. And so I didn't burn the bridge, but I was like, no. And I never went back to that person again because it just wasn't aligned. And there's more money out there for us to get. We were able to go out and get the money that we needed. But it was really important for us to maintain our integrity and maintain our decision-making structure as it was. So yeah, there's lots of different ways to make people feel um, your gratitude for their gift. Like I said, handwritten notes, phone calls, emails are a great way to just send a message out. And if you can get a meeting with somebody, I highly recommend that. If it's your first meeting with someone, you might want to focus more on cultivation and gratitude. And there's an element of like qualification, which, we could probably do a whole training on donor qualification and donor research. But if you have future meetings with folks after a while of after you've had some time to cultivate them, you'll also be having solicitation meetings. And sometimes, if you're in a meeting, I think you always want to be ready to talk about their giving. If they bring it up, you always want to be ready. You want to know what was the last gift they gave? What is the next aspirational gift that you'd like to ask them for in case they might at the end of the meeting be like, so what more can I do? That's an opening, right? Well, if you're open to it, we can talk a little bit about your giving, here are these volunteer opportunities. If you're open to or you're able to this year, we are asking all of our donors to consider making an increase this year of X amount or X percentage. That will be X for you. Is that something that you could do? And then again, like we talked about before, once you've made an ask, give them a minute to think about it. So hopefully that's a helpful answer to that question. The next question is, what specific information about a donor are you looking for when evaluating their potential or interest? Where do you find it? Another great question. So when I'm evaluating a donor, there's so much information. I'm looking for a few things. So I want to know what they give to. If they give other places, I want to know what kinds of things they give to. If I'm a healthcare organization and they only give to animal shelters, I want to know that. That doesn't mean they're not a prospect, but it might mean that I have to do a little bit more to gauge their interest in what we do. But if I'm a healthcare organization and I see they're like giving to every hospital and every health cause, I know there's strong alignment there. So that's one thing. What else do they give to? What are they giving to us? What have they given to us over the years? Are they a new donor? Are they a donor who's been with us for some time? Have they been increasing their giving? Have they decreased their giving? Do they give regularly? Do they give kind of sporadically? What are they giving in response to? Um, Another thing that I'm looking for is like just, what do they do for a living, right? I might look for some indicators of their capacity, right? Like, what do they do for a living? If you have access to Wealth Engine, there's information in there sometimes about their investment income, their actual compensation from their job. There's information in there about their net worth. It's not always 100% accurate, but there's information about their net worth. They do some calculations to see what their capacity is for giving, like how much they would give. And that number is usually more tied to a campaign gift. So an extraordinary gift that you would ask them for that they might actually pay out over 5 or 10 years. So they might be giving you $1,000 a year to your annual fund, which is the money that you bring in annually that kind of anchors the work of your organization. Campaign funding is more like oftentimes it's capital campaign. It has to do with buildings and infrastructure. So we're building a new building or we're renovating our building. And so we need to raise a certain amount of capital to be able to do that. And so these are bigger gifts. So if you're giving me $1,000 to the annual fund, I might ask you for 10,000 for the capital campaign, or even five, or even 50,000 or 100,000, depending on your capacity. And that gift usually, typically, would be paid out over 5 years or 10 years as opposed to all in one lump sum. And the idea, generally, the expectation is that those people also maintain their annual giving. So it's not, as they say, robbing Peter to pay Paul. And this is something if folks are thinking about capital campaigns, this is also something that we can talk about and support around. But that's one example is looking at Wealth Engine and finding that capacity information. Um, finding people's backstories, just finding, anything about them that would help me to kind of get a sense of who they are, especially if sometimes it's helpful for me to know like what are people's political affiliations to. And that way I know like what might I be walking into? What can I bring up? What might I not want to bring up? And obviously, again, going back to alignment, there might be certain people you don't want to meet with because their political alignment is so out of sync with what your values and philosophy are. And there might be somewhere it's just a touch like, okay, I know that they might be touchy about this thing that we did. So I want to be prepared to address that or to acknowledge that, or they might have questions about that. So it might be helpful to know what their political leanings are and that sort of thing, which is information you can often find online. Where I look for the information, again, Wealth Engine. I think people mention Google. All of your search engines are great. I often find a lot of biographical information about people in obituaries. Like, so they're, oftentimes that, somebody older in the family, a mother, father, uncle, and aunt passed away, and they're listed as a surviving family member. And so you can get information about like maybe where they grew up or how many siblings they have, that sort of thing, which it's helpful for me because I'm doing research profiles for other people. It may not be information that you need necessarily for the work that you're doing. But that's another piece of information you can get. Um, I think the big thing. Board affiliations is another thing. If they sit on any boards, it does give you an idea of what they're interested in. And I think what boards people serve on, whether or not they're donating to those organizations, which they often are, but they may not be. I think board affiliations are a great indicator of what people are interested in, what they care about. And like I said, people who volunteer are donors. They're donating their time. And time is, to me, as valuable as money. So, and that's something to think about as well. It's almost like another kind of donation. So hopefully that helps. The next question is the issue of asking the right questions shows up in many forms. Do you have a suggested list, or is there a list of suggestions to ask? How would the people answer the questions? Yes, no, a sentence. So open-ended questions are better. Yes or no questions just aren't going to get you, they say yes or no and you're done. You want to get people talking. So I would definitely recommend more open-ended questions. And the questions are going to vary depending on what you do and depending on who they are. But generally, good questions are, how did you learn about our work? Is there anything that you've seen, in our work, or, especially if you just kind of shared about your work, like, is there anything in there that you find particularly interesting or that is particularly exciting to you? You might share volunteer opportunities and ask them, like, is there something that they'd be interested in doing? Asking them about, where just like where they're giving their time and their money. Like, I noticed that you're really involved in your community. Can you tell me more about that? Tell me more about, what you do there. And really in these meetings, I'm just getting to know people. So anybody who is an organizer or who has done community work may have done like one-on-one meetings. And I really draw on that a lot when I'm meeting with donors is it's as much about getting to know them and striking up a rapport as it is about getting information. You don't want it to feel like an interrogation. So, yeah, generally just asking them about themselves, asking them good follow-up questions. If they've shared, I work at the Bushnell, so people will say, "Oh, I've been coming to the Bushnell since I was a kid." Oh, that's great. Tell me more about that. Like, what kinds of things did you do at the Bushnell when you were a kid? Or, oh, I performed here. Oh, what was that like? That's so cool. We hear that story so much. Can you tell me more? Sometimes can you say more about that is a great way to get people talking because people will drop these little nuggets and just not carry it forward. And so just to say, oh, wow, that's so interesting. Can you tell me more about that? Can get people to open up a little bit more and also feel like it's okay because people might have cut themselves off thinking, I don't want to talk too much, but really inviting people to share who they are, what they care about, what they're connected to. Yeah, how are you engaging in your community? Like what are the community activities that you like to participate in? What kinds of events do you like to go to? Also you can get information about how to best communicate with them. You want to really make sure that who are my shy donors, who are my donors who really want a lot of attention. So, we're generally reaching out to people like this. And I'm just checking in with everybody to see like how do you like to be kept in the loop about what we're doing, right? How would you like to be informed? Have you been reading our newsletter? Have you seen our social media? Make sure that they're connecting to all those places because you might be putting out a ton of information about what you're doing and they may not be receiving it. So make sure, check in. Are you getting this? Are you getting that? What's your preferred way to be reached out to? Should I email you? Should I call you? Is text message okay? We have these events coming up. Which one of these events is exciting to you? So it's just so much information. And the more you do this work, the more you'll realize what are the right questions for you, the questions that are going to get you the information you need to create the best donor experience. Um, and then the final question, well, I kind of answered this a little bit. Are you sending an official thank you and the handwritten? I would like to, but seems like a lot of postage. So that's a great question. I would say, I'm not sure what you mean by an official thank you. If people are giving online, there's probably like a thing that goes out, maybe even a receipt that goes out. So like I said, double and triple check what is going out when somebody gives, like what are those automatic things so you know what you need to do. I would definitely send you can send a letter. I think I may have answered this in the chat too, but or in the session itself, but you can send a letter That's like a form letter, and then write a handwritten note on that letter to save postage. And then at the end of the year, you probably want to send out a gift receipt. So that way, when they're doing their taxes, they have that receipt and also reminds them of what they gave. You might do that actually at the beginning of the following year, but it reminds them of what they gave. And you can drop a soft ask envelope in there as well so that they can give again. Um, yeah, those are some general thoughts. Those are the big questions that I had that I felt like we didn't really get to in the session. But like I said, if there's other questions that people have that are burning questions, this is how you reach out to me. I'm pointing up. I guess I should point down. Kamel at fertilesoilstrategies.com. And I would love to continue talking with y'all and building community and helping you reach your fundraising goals. Thank you.